All right.
All right.
So hello, everybody. Thank you for attending the first session of Who Are Our Ancestors?
Indeed.
We'll dig
You're
into
welcome.
it. As a start, just because you guys had mentioned it yesterday, I thought I did find the fellow who died at Tippecanoe. I thought I'd
Hmm.
uh, it's this guy, First Lieutenant Richard McMahon.
No, that's what I remember, Lieutenant McMahon, and that didn't show up on one of the things I went to.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, Lieutenant McMahon. I'm sure that's who she told me.
Not only is that the person, but there's further things to know, which is that, as you can see, when he died, he was married to Patsy G. Withers and
Mhm.
had some children. Um, After he died, Patsy Withers then went on to marry John Blair McMahon, who is our direct ancestor. Um, so had he not died, and whose daughter married Alan Mathis, which then got us into the Mathis family, if I can remember which way it goes. Um, but yeah, had he not died, then she wouldn't have remarried John Blair McMahon, and then where would we have been? Um,
In an alternate universe. Yeah.
yeah, so there you go. Getting back to it, I'll just show you again. Um, okay, so so Donald, Gretna Yunker, then Grace Mathis, Claudius Mathis, um,
Hang on, could you
Sarah.
slow down a little bit? Could we go back to could I see our grandparents? Could we start there for like
Yeah.
1 second to just get
Yeah, yeah.
oriented?
Okay, you're right. It's disorienting. Just there you go.
Okay.
Richard McMahon, born in Colonial West Virginia, 1775. Um,
So your grandfather's name was Peter Connor?
yes. Okay.
Hmm.
So yeah. So you can see Donald Wallace Connor, Francis Wallace Connor, Peter Connor, John Connor, and he's the one who came to America, John Connor.
Where did John Connor come from?
He came from Ireland, to dad, what I'm sure
Huh.
Dad will bring up. It's not clear whether it's Protestant Ireland or Catholic Ireland, but since
Right.
married Anne Fitzpatrick, who's from England, um, and has a
So
Scottish,
so
probably.
that would be so that
When
was
when did he come to America? What year?
Let's see if we can find out. He's buried in Malone, New York. So he came to Malone, which is upstate New York, right by the Canadian border.
Yeah. I remember hearing that at the time, long ago.
I don't have a year, but he shows up in residence by 1860 on our censuses. So it would have been slightly prior to that. Let me see if Anne Fitzpatrick has anything.
What year was he born?
He was born in 1824 in Ireland.
Okay, the Great Famine in Ireland is 1841 to 1845. And prior to that famine, almost nobody who was Catholic left Ireland except to join the British military. Catholics just didn't leave. Only the Protestants left, and that's because under the laws of primogeniture, if you weren't the oldest son, you stood to inherit nothing, and there was an incentive to get out and look to make your path in the new world.
Sure, that's why they joined the military too, of course.
Well,
So
a
he
lot
was
of them were conscripted as far as that goes, but true.
so he was probably a non firstborn son Protestant in Ireland.
Well, he might have been if he left before the famine, almost certainly.
Well, he left a long time. By the way, there was a major famine, perhaps even bigger in the 18th century, but that was way before him. So
Yeah.
he didn't
But
have either
if he
of
was
them.
born in 1824, he would have only been 17 when the famine started.
Sure.
Mhm.
So,
Either way,
but
He-
it would be nice to know
I think
because
it's definitely something I want to dig
I
into.
think he was Protestant. I think I can't put my finger on it, but I'm pretty sure he was Protestant.
Mhm.
And I don't know if the famine extended to northern most Ireland or not.
You could find out if you could find out where he's buried in Malone.
Yeah, we can. This is his gravestone. He
Wow.
the North St. Joseph Cemetery.
Sounds Catholic.
It does sound Catholic, but
His wife might have been a Catholic. I don't know.
yeah. By the way,
Frank
isn't it amazing
Connor,
how much
Connor
stuff is out
definitely
there?
was not a Catholic, but that could have happened afterward, obviously.
Sure. But yeah, Malone, New York, you can go see the gravestone. Um, I think it's amazing just how much stuff is out there. Like
Oh, yeah.
you can just keep.
Yeah,
Well,
Uh,
you're turning into a regular Miles Mathis, Chris.
oh yeah.
You should read some of his stuff. But he's going through all these giant databases. You know, there are, I mean, really massive nobility, and the kind of database you're searching for,
Mhm.
everybody
Yeah.
generally. And if
Yeah.
you can't find them there, they probably changed their name.
Even then you can find them. So one thing I want to show
oh,
you, this is
what, Peter Connor was born in 1852, is that what that said?
1850, September 11th, 1853.
1853, okay.
And
Malone, New York.
yep. And then he died in Keene, New Hampshire, which it looks like Peter Connor, the elder, sort of created a family structure around himself because Keene, New Hampshire is where there's a huge
Yes,
area for Connors.
yeah, I have some photographs, one or two of the house in Keene.
Oh, you have to send that. When you get
Yep.
a chance. Yeah. So I didn't know that Keene was like a Connor homeland of sorts, but it clearly is. There's a ton in that county.
Keene, New Hampshire.
Yep. Apparently it's a big railroad town. Um, so I thought that was kind of interesting because I know you're interested about that, Andy.
Mhm.
I was going to show you. So Frank Connor married Nancy Johnson in 1915. But like I mentioned earlier, there is another wife before that, Lavinia Donnelly, married in 1902.
Mm-hmm.
East Coast.
Did he divorce her or did she die?
She didn't die. She died in 1965.
Oh, okay, so she divorced him probably
Uh,
because
Probably. Yeah.
Nancy divorced him.
Yep.
He was apparently a wife beater.
Yeah.
Although Nancy told me the most terrifying thing was that when she was pregnant with, I forget which one, she was in a boarding house in upstate New York for the whole winter. And he's out on the road and she has no word for him for months.
Sure.
And she said
Wow.
that became extremely terrifying because he was sole support and she'd eventually be thrown out of the boarding house
Mm-hmm.
with her baby.
Yeah. That would
So
be.
so who is this? Is Frank that we're talking about? He's the wife
Yes,
beater,
Frank,
and
yes.
and
Frank,
he is Donald's grandfather. He's your
Father.
great.
Yeah.
Father.
Okay, so
Father.
he's your grandfather.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And
There's another wife after Nancy as well.
he did?
Yeah, he got married again.
I haven't seen. Okay. I'll look for that. That's good to know. He died in Rhode Island.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a couple of cards for him when I was a teenager.
We got regular cards at Christmas and Easter from him.
Yeah.
And one of the shocking things that we learned when Peter and I went out to Blue Point to paint the Clark's house, Don's sister, Catherine, married Richard Clark, was that their children had never heard anything from their grandfather. And we got birthday cards and Christmas cards usually with $1 in them.
Yeah, with $1, as I recall.
Signed Gramp.
Hmm.
And Winston had never had any communication whatsoever from his grandfather.
Why not? Any idea?
Okay, so who is Winston? Let's start with that.
Okay, Don had a sister.
Right.
She was 6 years older. Her name is Catherine with a C.
Catherine Marjorie Connor right here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it says 1916. I would have guessed 17, but I knew she was 6 years older. So maybe 7 years older. Although Don was born early in January. So
Yeah, so it's 6 and a
Okay.
half. It's fine.
Yeah, he was born on the 3rd, I think.
he was born on the 2nd.
2nd, okay.
Yes. Tim on the 12th, you on the 17th.
Yeah.
And Catherine married Richard Clark.
Okay. Richard.
And I can get you more information about that because I know where Wynn is. And they had 2 children. Winston Clark was currently living in New York in a small town. I have an address for him. And his younger sister, Victoria Clark, Dale, she emigrated to England and married someone, boy, I got to think of his first name.
Yeah, he was in like PR or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Clark
but,
with an-
but
Clark
I
with
get
an E?
regular correspondence from
Yeah,
Vic.
just a quick pause. Is it Clark with an E or without an E?
No E,
Okay.
just a K. Hold on a minute, I'll be right back.
Sure.
When Catherine was a teenager, she had tuberculosis and was in a
Yeah.
sanitarium for a while.
Oh, wow.
That was before they had a cure.
Mm-hmm.
1950s, they had a cure. I mean, it took a while, but mixture of antibiotics and stuff. I don't know.
Wow.
Chris, I will send you this. Victoria's husband is named Jeff. I don't
Okay.
know why I spaced out. But we regularly send each other cards and letters, usually around holidays. Victoria's oldest child is a girl named Carrie Dwen, known as Carrie, Cerri. And she is now married, and this is their child, which Victoria sent me in her most recent correspondence. I was commenting about our youngest grandchild, Maverick. He said they're a lot of fun. That's Victoria.
Vicky, as she was called. My father's comment on the Winston and Victoria names was that
was Teddy, by the way, Theodore.
what his comment was that their infatuation with the English was a product of not having been there. Basically, he had spent considerable time in England.
So as far as we know, Wynn has never married and never had any children.
And Wynn is Richard's brother?
No, Wynn is our cousin. He is Richard's child.
Okay.
The oldest, they had 2 children, Winston and Victoria.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay. And
He
when,
played the organ at our wedding, though.
It's pretty cool.
He played it very well. Everybody was impressed.
oh, yeah, is a very, very accomplished musician and choral conductor. He made a living out of playing the organ for a paycheck in a particular church. From there were two or three, but one of them was in Connecticut. He lived in New York City for a long time,
Yeah, pretty close.
and also playing various weddings and other events as on call.
Side note, since all of you were at my wedding, I think getting the live music and the live band was the best decision we did. I love that.
I think everybody really liked that. That was fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Andy, you were posted up right in front of them, just kind of taking it like in as a concert for a little while, I remember.
Yes, we enjoyed them a lot.
I think the trampoline was a great deal too.
Oh, that was especially for all the parents, more so than the kids even.
Now, if we go back a second to Frank Connor,
Mm-hmm.
Frank had two sisters,
Okay, let me.
Daisy and Charlotte.
And yeah, Daisy, yeah.
Charlotte and Daisy.
Daisy's the one we knew.
Yes, Daisy May, right.
Daisy was a sweetheart, but tough as nails.
And I don't believe Daisy ever got married.
No, I don't think so either.
Um,
Daisy
and-
was a nurse in World War One.
yes, I have a photograph of
Horrifying
her in
experience.
her graduation outfit when she finished nursing school. And she looks prepared to demand that people obey her instructions. She looks quite prepossessing.
She was super nice to us. She was super nice to us, and she was the most frugal person you'll ever run into or even hear about. I mean, this was like if you're eating in a restaurant, which is kind of rare for her because her income was. Then if you didn't finish the bread on the table, you stuck it in your purse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nancy did that too, but
Yeah. Well, they grew up very poor.
when I was about 12, I think Pete was a year or two older. Daisy actually came to Chicago on her way to go visit the East Coast and spent a couple of days in Chicago. And we as a family collectively drove her around a bit and met with Nancy and had lunch.
Didn't we go to the Palmer House?
I don't remember the lunch, but what I do remember is that Daisy and Nancy did a bit of sparring in the car.
Oh, I don't.
And at some point, Daisy said something like to Nancy, something like, "You just didn't know how to handle Frank." And Nancy said something like, "The way to handle Frank was with a whip and a chair."
I don't know. We're talking about a guy who's been on the road and traveling salesman since he was a teenager. I don't know what you can do with that.
He was getting a lot of women were divorcing him in an age when not many people got divorces.
Right.
It's an indicator. But it sounds like the stories don't sound great about or great grandpa Frank.
Well,
yeah, no, in general, he was regarded as a black sheep.
Catherine testified against him in the divorce proceeding that Nancy instituted. And that, we believe, is the reason that he never, ever communicated with Catherine's children.
Probably.
He held a grudge over this and he simply shut them out completely.
Well, you know what else happened at the trial? Frank's lawyer suggested to the jury more than once, it sounds like, that Nancy's lawyer was having an affair with her.
Jesus, that's
Okay.
that doesn't sound like a above the board
That's
law
playing
practice.
pretty rough. It didn't work.
Yeah,
And it
But-
also doesn't sound like Nancy.
No, hardly.
Do you know when they got divorced roughly?
1930.
But remember, these were extremely hard times. Much of
oh,
this
yeah.
talking about
Sure.
extremely hard. Nothing. We've never experienced anything like that in the last 70 years.
I mean,
Did you find the date for that? I'm pretty sure it was 1930.
Divorces, it does, for some reason, divorce records are not commonly found.
Well, I
Even,
may be able to find it. It was in Cook County.
yeah,
Yeah, well, it was in the 30s. That's about all you have to know.
yeah, I mean, if you find here, if you find it, do tell me. I mean, or send anything, right?
Right. Okay. Will do. Anyway, that's just a note about Nancy and Daisy.
What about his other sister?
Charlotte. I don't know very much about Charlotte.
No, don't recall her.
I think she stayed. I think part of the reason Daisy made that trip was that Charlotte stayed somewhere in or around Keene, New Hampshire. And I'm pretty sure I have a picture of her too.
Okay. What about his brothers, like Charles and William, and although William passed in 1948, but
Yeah, I don't know much about them. We were never introduced. Neither Peter nor I ever met Frank.
mm,
Wow.
And
That
Gretna
I did
told
not
me
know.
a story when she was about 75, that when she and Don got married, which was right before he went in the military
Hmm.
in 1943, then he went to New Jersey, to Monmouth, to do his basic training. And she was allowed to, she got some kind of local job and an apartment, and he was allowed to have weekends with her some of the time. And he wanted to take her to Rhode Island to introduce her to his father, and wrote a letter. You know, the guy is doing basic training, getting ready to go to Europe in World War II.
Yeah.
And he
mhm.
writes his father a letter saying, "We'd like to come and introduce you to my wife." And he got back a letter that said it wouldn't be convenient. And when Gretna told me this story, I'd never heard the
Jesus.
story
No, I
from
hadn't.
either of them. She said it broke his heart.
This is Don. This is Don's father, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Frank.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
Gretna never met Frank either.
So what did
And apparently it wouldn't be convenient because he was either about to get married or had just gotten married the third time. And
I see. Yeah.
Oh,
Do you know the name of his third wife by chance?
I don't know it. I'll look to see whether I have anything further about it.
Sure.
There are half, Don has half, at least one half brother in Chicago, but we never made any effort to establish contact with them. He
So
knew.
this is why on the genealogy site, they're popping up people who are fairly closely related to me genetically that I don't recognize anything about them. There's,
Yeah, Don
No.
knew that he had a half brother living in Chicago who had a family and all that.
Well, so I was going to ask you, because let me show you something. In the old censuses, we go to the 1931. I think it's this one. Nancy, Catherine, Donald, Francis. There was one where he, oh no, it's Catherine who was living with her half brother at some point.
That could be.
Be right back.
I'll tell you something weird I found though when I was looking at census records, and they were very carefully filled out for Nancy and the children. So it was a census record from the 1920s, living in Illinois, and it showed them as a family. It showed their religion, which was some kind of Protestantism.
This is like Henry Louis Gates.
Yeah.
Connor, Francis, Nancy, Charles, Catherine, Charles.
Exactly. Charles is from the first marriage with Lavinia.
Okay.
He's 16 when Catherine's 3.
Well, my point is the census record I found, which was probably from the late 20s, did not list Frank. I mean, I thought that was a little odd at the time, but I didn't know, I wasn't thinking much about the timeline.
Yeah.
Wow. This is
They were living in some place like Park Ridge or up near somewhere in there.
I think I think it was Lombard, which is fairly close.
Yeah, right. I've been there.
Because Nancy had 2 sisters. Anna was, I think, the oldest one.
The oldest.
And Anna's Anna had married Anton Anderson,
Yeah.
who was a butcher, and therefore kept the family decently fed during the Depression. And they lived in Lombard. And I think when Nancy stopped living with Frank, she wound up living with them in Lombard. And eventually, their child, Mildred, got married and wound up in the house in Park Ridge.
Okay, let's back up. So who is Kathy that Nancy was living with in Lombard?
Oh, Anna,
Anna,
Who is Anna? Oh,
her sister.
her older sister.
okay. So let's go to the Norwegian side then. Okay. So we got
Anna
Anna
Johnson.
Johnsen.
Yeah,
That should probably be Johnson, right?
Yeah.
right,
Olga,
right. And
Nancy,
Olga was the other one, right?
okay. And then Kristen Olaf Johnson, who died in 1948. Okay.
But
So that's the Norwegian side of our family.
yeah.
This is your grandmother is Nancy Johnson here, right?
Where
Right.
the Norwegian,
Right. Nancy Marie Johnson, right?
Where the Norwegian church is on the near north side? I mean, you go by it a lot if you spend time up there, which
I'm sure
I
I have. Mm-hmm.
It's
Marie's
very near north. That was the Norwegian area in the 1900s, circa 1900. And I mean, I think in fact, they had 2 Norwegian churches, and Nancy's family, there were like 7, 8 kids, as I recall. And when her father went off to sea, he was a merchant seaman, he never came back.
And that's Engelhart, right? Engelhart Johnson. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard that story before. So he
Yeah.
was the merchant seaman who just like disappeared.
Disappeared, and
Right.
nobody has ever known what happened to him.
And he was your
Great-grandfather.
great grandfather on Gretna's side. So
And,
Gretna's grandfather.
No, on Don's side.
Oh, on
on
Don's.
Don's side.
Okay, on
On
Don's
Don's
side.
side,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, but Nancy told this story to me a couple of times. She's, she had a much older aunt, not a sister, an aunt.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, when the father never came back, said that my mother would say, well, God will provide. She said, and then my aunt went out and provided.
You remember what her aunt's name or her sister's name was?
Or it was her aunt that provided.
Her aunt provided.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
and a sister of her mother.
Well, I
right,
know. Oh, well, okay. Her being Nancy, right? So Anna's
right,
okay.
So
right. There,
Anna's or Engelbert's sister.
Anna Nilsson was Nancy's mother, and the oldest child of Anna and Engelhart was Anna Emily Johnson. That was our Aunt Anna. And
Yeah.
then there was an Olga.
But
And
anyway, this aunt would have been obviously much older. But Nancy just loved that story. And she was, she said, so Nancy had to go to work when she was 13.
right,
Hmm.
She was in an ice cream shop.
Yeah, you told me about that. She's the one that like couldn't eat ice cream after a
He
while,
said that
right?
the proprietor said you can have all the ice cream you want, And she said after a week, I wouldn't touch the stuff, basically,
Yeah.
you know.
just looking at this, if you look at the left-hand part of the screen that I'm looking at, we
Mhm.
have Anna Emily Johnson. She was married to a guy named Anton Anderson, A-N-T, yeah, and Anderson, I believe, was S-E-N.
It's probably S-E-N,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's Norwegian. It looks like that's the Norwegian version of the
Right.
spelling.
Okay.
And he died in about 1950.
I vaguely remember him. I vaguely remember him. I'm not sure
Yeah,
when.
you were just old enough because
Yeah.
when he died, that was before we had moved to Sangamon. And they did not take me to the funeral, but they might have taken you. I think Grayson Howard came over and babysat me.
Mm.
Another story, when I mentioned on one of our numerous visits to Park Ridge, we go for Sunday dinner usually.
Yeah,
Mhm.
But I said to Aunt Anna that, I mentioned that you and I were going or had gone to Glacier Park. And she said, oh, yeah, Anton and I, we took the train there back in the 1930s. I can't remember anything about it, but she said it was nice. And you can take the train right into, East Glacier there.
right.
But she
Yeah.
said, yeah, we took the train there. I was just, was surprising,
Yeah.
So they had enough, they had enough that they could actually take a trip.
Yeah, he apparently made a pretty good living.
Yeah, well, good butcher can make a good living just about anywhere.
Now, Anna and Anton
Mhm.
had a daughter named Mildred.
Okay.
I don't know who Jenny is,
Yeah, I'll
unless
figure that out later.
unless Jenny is Mildred's legal first name and everybody called her Millie.
That could be. Yeah, well,
And Millie married a guy, and I forget his first name, but his last name was Huff, Huff.
yeah. He was Air Force. He had been in Japan, and that's why Kate had a Japanese half sister.
Is that right?
Huh.
I did not know that.
Oh, we even talked about it the last time. She talked about how her sister, and she talked and were very friendly. And maybe they had even been to Japan.
I know that Mildred and whatever his name was, Huff, divorced when I was a kid. And we would go there on Sundays to have dinner with Anna and Nancy and Mildred and Kate and Steve. They're Mildred's two kids, who were a little older than Pete and I. And we never, at least I never got any stories about the senior Huff. Um, However, our cousin Steve had some issues about his father more or less abandoning him as a child.
You like the Japanese woman better. That's, Kate talked to me several times about this.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but she really liked her half sister. I don't know whether, by our standards, she was a legitimate child or not, or whether he had married in Japan too. But she was about the same age as Kate, not much different.
So Mildred and Huff, what was the name of their children?
Stephen
Stephen,
and Catherine.
well, and Stephen, I think was VEN, but I'm not
Yeah,
positive.
I'm not sure either.
No, Stephen Huff. Last name was
Oh,
Huff,
right.
Huff.
Yeah, and Kate got the brains in that family.
And Kate was Catherine with a C, Anne, ANNE, I believe. Huff.
Wait, like this?
No, Catherine,
Middle name.
just INE, right, Anne Huff. She subsequently married someone named Richard.
Yeah, he was a stockbroker.
Last name Gottfred.
Godfrey.
Gottfred.
Like
No,
that?
no E on the end, just Gottfred, like that.
Okay.
And they are still married, living in Gulf, Illinois.
Hmm.
And they have 3 kids, all of whom obviously are now adults.
3 girls.
No, 1 boy, Bradley, 2 girls.
And then I think they have 4 girls. 3 girls.
I think it's
And
only
one
3.
boy.
Should we go through do you know them well enough to name them?
I don't, but
Um,
I've met them. I've met
The
them all.
boy is Bradley, and I'm not sure of the girls' names, although
It's
they were,
interesting. 2 of them looked like Kate, and one was very dark haired and looked quite different.
Okay.
yeah, I just don't remember the names, but I would know.
Well,
If
we
I
can go
heard
back.
them, I would know.
Yeah.
I think one of them was Lindsay,
Lindsay,
L-I-N,
yeah.
Lindsay or Sey.
I don't know how it's spelled, right? Lindsay that's true. Yeah. It's interesting. And I wonder if he had any more Japanese children.
And so, okay, so
That I've never known.
when Huff divorced Mildred and got remarried,
Well, we don't know if he
or
got
whatever.
married.
Do you know the name? Do you know the names of their kids or anything?
I don't know.
Okay,
No,
that's fine.
to find that out, we'd have to get in touch with Kate,
Okay, we can deal with that later.
which we can try to do.
Because I mean, I don't know, but I would suspect that it was still in Japan.
Okay.
So, I don't know how much access you have to Japanese records, but
I don't know. I'll find out. Okay, so that's Anna. Olga.
Olga, I don't know much about who she married, but she lived in Muskegon, Michigan,
yeah, Muskegon, right?
and had twin boys, Robert and Raymond.
Oh yeah.
Olga married a guy named Ahrens. I guess we got it there, Walter Christian Ahrens.
Yep.
And Robert and Raymond were familiar figures. We saw them on numerous occasions at family gatherings. Apparently, well, you've got Raymond's wife, Esther,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have Robert's. I'm pretty sure Robert got married.
Okay.
And there are some kids there, but I'm not sure who they are.
Okay.
You know, when I went to law
And,
school, one
and
of the,
last I knew, they were both, Robert and Raymond were both still in Muskegon.
yeah, I was gonna say, when I went to law school, in my class at Northwestern, there was a woman named Mary Yunker,
Mm-hmm.
and I would not a friend of mine. I really didn't know her at all, but I would bet dimes to dollars that she's probably offshoot from the extremely large Yunker family.
Sure, could be.
So, yeah, it sure could.
Um, so then, okay, so that's Olga's family. What about Christian Olaf? Do you know anything about her?
I don't. I never
Yeah,
met
actually,
her,
I can.
obviously. She died before I was born.
Yeah, he died in 1948. Okay. And then you mentioned Anna had a sister. I don't know anything, so I don't know anything about Anna's family.
And I had, yeah, I mean,
You guys know anything?
I
no,
don't.
no.
I don't. My guess is that Kate Gottfried does.
Okay.
It'll be something we can look into.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Kate's mom, Mildred, did make the trip to Norway
Really?
and establish connections with other family members still living in Norway.
Johnsen, of course,
And
being one of the most common names in all of Scandinavia.
yes,
Mhm.
very, very common. But not too long after Kathy and I were married in the late 70s, there was a gathering in Barrington, Illinois, of some people who were distant relatives in some way. And the reason there was a gathering is some of the Johnsen clan from Norway had come to America on some junket where they were in a busload of people going around, and they had time this particular Sunday or Saturday to hang out with some of their distant relatives. And so uh, not Grace, Gretna and Don went, and Kathy and I went, uh, along with Mildred and whoever, Steve and Kate. Met these Norwegians, although I don't remember anything about it other than being
Uh, it's funny
so.
that, you know, I remember this is really only two real explanations for the disappearance of Nancy's father. One,
Mhm.
he was killed at sea or, you know, somewhere along the line because, you know, bar fights and whatnot. And the other is that he went back to Norway and started a new family, which apparently
Mhm.
was by no means uncommon. And I
That
was
could happen.
I think that Anna tried to, maybe some other members of the family tried to kind of investigate that possibility at some point. But as I said, everybody in Norway and Sweden is named Johnson, it seems like.
Well, the
Well,
problem is
if
it
he died in
technically
the ship,
is same
go ahead.
thing, but the issue with last names in Scandinavia is that the way it works is your last name is your father's name plus uh some like son or sen or sometimes doctor. So like my name would be like Chris Peterson, for example,
Yeah,
and your name would be Peter Donaldson. It's very annoying because there's no,
right.
Mhm.
tracing through the generations.
Yeah, well, you know, in Sweden, until sometime in the 19th century, the non-aristocracy was not allowed to have last names.
No, I didn't know that.
Very obscure fact, but so it would be like it was in the old Britain. It would be John from, you know, Chicago, or, you know, Olaf from, you know, Svenska. You know, I mean, it would just be your name and where you're from.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was illegal by law for them to take a last.
Yeah, but those are the Swedes. We're Norwegian.
Yeah, it's probably the same in Norway.
Mhm.
Uh,
Not
Well,
bloody
they
likely.
were the same country until what, like 1850?
yeah, they were the same country for a long time. They
Um,
were all ruled by Denmark. You know that.
yeah. Well, it changed around. Uh,
Yeah,
well, Andy, if you find out more about the Norwegian family, I'd be fascinated. Because like you can see, it's sort of like it caps off there. That would be good.
Yes. I'll see what I can learn.
Okay. Um, let's see. Is there anything else?
I'd like to get further back on Lieutenant McMahon and but basically just the Mathis family, period.
Well, that's fine. So I just want to finish up the
Yeah, I know. I'm not
Donald's
trying to rush you.
side, then we'll do your
Mhm.
mom's side.
I'm just giving you a wish list. That's all.
Yeah, for sure.
I think they do have a family tree for the Mathis family, but
I
I
have quite a bit of information about that because Grace did some things and Gretna did some with Paul and John when they were kids doing things for school.
my understanding is that the Mathises had three persons, three men, and at least two of them were officers in the Revolutionary War.
I
And
don't know about that. I do know that Martin Hardin is identified by the DAR as having served in the Revolutionary War, and he was the identified relative in the DAR certificate that
Right.
Olive obtained.
yeah, well, that's what my mother told me. Yeah, she wasn't into the DAR, but that they had done extensive research for the DAR members of the family.
Right.
Sure. Well, to
They-
start
they-
with, it looks like Alexander John Mathis, your, I don't know, father, grandfather, great grandfather, great great grandfather, whatever, great great great.
I saw a chart that
Heritage
went back to the
Virginia.
1500s at one point.
Oh, it goes way back. Like some of these lines just go back forever. Like here's you know,
William Odell the sixth, 1630. John Sadler, 1597.
yeah, like
The,
here's
the generation, you can see the generation gaps are getting a lot shorter.
I think John Sadler, that sounds familiar. But
yeah.
Richard Bennett, all right, Bennett is a good name back then, no wonder.
Yeah, I mean, you can play with it, but sometimes you find a family, a branch, a twig of the tree that just keeps going back to Middle Ages or beyond.
Yeah.
So if you get into this, it can be a lot of fun just because you can keep digging backwards.
What program are you using?
Anybody come over on the Mayflower?
I don't know. I was one.
Well,
I know that's a story I was looking for. I don't have the answer yet.
I've heard that rumor.
What I was told by my grandmother is that they came to Maryland in 1630. So they wouldn't have been to me. They may have been Catholics because Maryland was a Catholic state.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a whole Maryland branch. Where did that go?
I was also told that they owned much of the city of Baltimore, and it was taken away by thieving politicians sometime in the 1700s.
Yeah.
And they had a lawsuit going for 100 years to no avail, something like that. I talked to Darby about that because he knew he had done legal research and he was from Maryland, and he said, "Man, you don't have to get very far back when you can't figure out who owned what. It's impossible. There's so many quit claims and whatnot." He said the property records are just complete wreck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like you can, yeah. So here's the Maryland, the Chenoweths. That's sort of where.
Yeah, Chenoweth. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So we're probably related to that famous actress, Chenoweth. What's her name?
We might not be.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There are a lot of Chenoweths.
It could be.
Chenoweth is a semi-noble name. I'm not sure. It may have been petty nobility at one point or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see going.
Wow, that's going way back.
Yeah. So going back to, so if we're gonna start stories on your mom's side, uh,
So it was, Mathis is spelled I-S back then. Now it's spelled, with my grandmother, it was spelled E-S, I thought.
Mhm.
I
I saw both of those.
I
You see
can't
both
vouch.
spellings all the time.
I'd have
It's
to
all the
check.
same family. Any
It
old
can depend on
Mathises
what
are
document.
probably related back to that, if you go back far enough.
Yeah. It can depend on documents because it's pretty clear that going back that uniform spelling wasn't a priority all the
No,
time.
it definitely was not considered important. To put it mildly.
If you don't mind me being a little bit you know, or organized here, let's start with the Yunker family, which is much shorter
Yeah,
in terms of chain because it seems to go straight to Switzerland.
yeah, it does.
So tell me.
Reportedly, they came over on their own sailing ship.
Rudolph Junker Sr. and Rosetta Liu.
Yes,
Yeah,
they came in I believe 1882.
yeah, right, yeah.
And we actually, I have a few photographs, but not many. We actually have a chest that Grace had, which came from Rudolph and was part of the baggage they brought when they came from
Really?
Switzerland, according to Grace. I don't know that I could verify that, but it's just an old brown box with, metal strapping on it, like a steamer trunk.
So Grace's grandfather was born in 1817.
Yeah, this was Howard's.
He lived a hell of a long time for those days when the life expectancy was 45.
A lot of people lived really long.
Yeah.
I'm finding like Grace.
Well, anybody that owned something like a little farm or a real business or something back then was going to live typically quite a bit longer than people who didn't. And that just,
Well, I think also when you're looking at genealogy, you're looking at the people who survived long enough to have kids.
Yeah, there's a survivor bias.
In the box for Rudolph and Rosetta, there's an arrow for children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me rebase.
They had, I believe, 11 children. Pete, does that sound right?
9 is what I recall.
3, 4.
I thought they had 9 boys and two girls.
I think there was only one girl.
I
Maybe.
have recorded. So tell me if there are any names missing. I got Rose Yunker, Rudolph Yunker Jr., John Jacob, Emil Alexander, Mary, Fred,
Or
Mabel.
Fred.
Yeah.
I
Mabel.
remember Howard was the youngest.
Howard.
Yeah, Mabel, Mary, and what was the other one? Rose?
Yes, the oldest was Rose.
Yeah, there were 3 girls. How many boys do we have here? Rudolph, John Jacob, Emil, Fred, that's 4.
And Howard.
And Howard is 5. So that was 8 altogether. Howard was the youngest one. I remember that.
It was more than that, I think.
Probably.
I remember 9, and it might.
Yeah, I thought there were at least 9. I thought there were 9 boys. So
there probably are. I can't promise that we have all of the children just based on documents. So
No. Especially since some of them, the story that, about, was it Rudolph?
I think it's Rude was the bad apple.
But he was born in Switzerland. Okay.
Yep.
And they came over here and he had a very nice farm raising peppermint, I think.
Yeah.
And he was a shrewd fellow. And it comes around to World War II, and people are going around like the officials are going around like, well, where's your birth certificate? And he didn't have one, and he was never bothered to get naturalized. So he was technically an enemy alien.
Even though he'd been born here, though, right?
No, he was born in Switzerland.
Oh, he was born in Switzerland. Okay.
And
Yeah, 1875. Yeah.
and my mother said the officials looked at themselves and they said, like, I think we're just going to forget about this, and went away. Like, this makes my head hurt. Forget this. And he was like, what, 65 or something then. But he couldn't, he was, by all accounts, he was rather lazy, but clever.
Hmm.
He, in all those years, he never bothered to get naturalized.
Well, never came up.
I guess not. And it never did come up either. I'm sure that happened in lots of places in the US, but
Yeah, that's interesting. What else do you know about the Yunker family? Probably.
There are still a couple of families in the Greater Howe phone book, which is not a very big phone book, named Yunker. Kathy and I went over to Howe 4 or 5 years ago one day, just driving around, stopped in a cafe to have some lunch, chatted with the waitress who had no familiarity with the Yunkers at all. But I got the phone book from her and copied down the names of a couple. There were 2 or 3 Yunkers listed. But to my chagrin, I have to admit I did not contact any of them.
well,
I thought it would be a little weird to say, hi, I might be a relative of yours.
what I can tell you, I'll tell you something about, when we were young, when I was 4.5,
There were a couple of reunions in Howe when we were kids.
yeah, but I'm just gonna say, Howard would take me to that little lake and fish. That's where I learned to
Yeah.
fish. when I
Yeah,
was-
Cedar Lake.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, but my mother told me, she said, Howard always went on fishing trips with his brothers, his 3 oldest brothers who were still alive. And they were all
Mhm.
farmers. He was the only non-farmer, I think. And she said, and they had all kinds of stories, like one of them stepped off a pier and went down 30 feet, but came back up and survived. And, various fishing kind of things. And she said Howard did a lot of fishing. He didn't hunt much, if at all.
Mhm.
But he did it because he was doing it with his brothers. That was a big thing. And she said eventually, when all his brothers died, he just lost his heart for it entirely.
I still have the last fishing rod he had and the reel, which was a bait casting reel.
Right. I remember I made a mess out of that reel a couple of times.
Yeah, bait casting takes touch.
Bait casting, you have to have four-year-olds don't have real good touch.
Well, they have to learn at least.
But yeah, she said that just took the heart right out of him. So they were actually a big part of his life. And the other thing I remember from being very young was Mama, Grace's mother, I guess.
Yes, Matilda Mathis, I think.
Who had been a beauty in her youth, apparently, but was a rather huge in her extreme old age. And I remember her, and she kind of spooked me. She looked kind of menacing, but I was like 3 or 4, and she died very shortly thereafter. But I mean,
Yeah,
pretty old.
So
And I know I did not go to her funeral. So
we have a photograph, and I have a feeling we made copies of it for Pete, but I don't know that Chris or Jack ever had it. Which shows Grace and her mother and her grandmother and Gretna when she was an infant. So you have 4 generations in that family in one picture, but the youngest of them is Gretna.
Hmm. No,
Yeah.
and her mom I have listed as Carrie Virginia Harned.
That's right. That's right. Matilda was Carrie's mother, or
Matilda,
Claude's, I forget which.
or what? Sorry.
It was either Carrie or Claude.
Oh,
Claude had a mother.
yeah, Claude's mother is I have listed as Sarah Ann McMahon, which then goes into the McMahon who became the Battle of Tippecanoe.
Yeah, it's
Okay, so Mama would have been Mary Ann Chenoweth then.
Okay.
that sounds right. And but the story that I heard a couple of times is that is it Grace's father or Grace's grandfather, whichever one she married, that he was engaged to somebody else. And this woman showed up in Brazil or wherever the heck it was they were living, Brazil, Indiana. And she was kind of making a play for, you know,
Hmm.
her father or his father, I think. But anyway, and she said, and they said, no, he is engaged to another. And she said something like, we'll see about that. And he said, it was a love at first sight and all that. She said, and my mother said, and then they fought for 60 years. He was a stonemason and built his own house.
Not Claude. Rudolph Yunker was a
No,
stonemason.
I don't think so. I think they were talking
Yeah,
about.
Rudolph Howard's father was a stonemason and
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that was it. Yeah.
he built the house.
Yeah.
Howard was born in a log cabin that they were living in across the road from the house that Rudolph
They
was
were building. Yeah. Well, now people live in trailer homes while they're building their house. Not much different.
You know anything
Oh,
about Rudolph and Rosetta's life in Switzerland before they came over?
I don't.
But they
I
must
believe
have.
the town they came from was Jägensdorf.
Regensdorf?
Jägensdorf.
I remember a different town.
What do you remember?
And that's I think Chris found this when he was a kid. It's just outside Bern.
Yeah, there's
That sounds right, but the name of the town.
Well,
Jagen.
I could have maybe I'm a little vague on the name, but yeah, it was in the vicinity of Bern, but a little bit out in the countryside. And I remember I Googled it.
Yeah, wait, what you just said, a municipality in the Bern
Yeah.
Middleland
Jagen.
Administrative District.
Jagendorf.
Yeah,
I remember when I
Mhm.
Googled that all these years ago, or not all of it, but the result of that was I was looking around, was that I got an ad from a guy who was an international arms dealer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could have gotten a bargain basement tank.
Wow.
Why didn't you, Dad? That would have been a great addition to the family
Legacy.
heirlooms.
I
Yeah,
didn't
exactly.
have really the garage for it.
Oh, okay, yeah, the storage.
If I can, like, going back to Nancy quick, I was wondering because I saw that she died in 1977. It listed as in Madison, Illinois.
No, and she died in Long Island, right?
She died in either Blue Point or Patchogue,
Yeah,
New York. Probably Patchogue, knowing
yeah. Where
that Blue Point didn't have a care facility for someone like her. By 1975, she was demented and or had Alzheimer's. She just didn't know who any of us were.
Okay.
And Catherine and my dad discussed it and ultimately decided that Catherine would put her in an institution out there.
Okay.
But for a year or two before that, they took turns. She would live with us for 3 months or 6 months and then go live on Long Island for 6 months.
Wow.
And she was fairly healthy, but she was clearly losing her mental acuity. And she had been a very sharp lady. And at one point, Peter and I moved out in 72 and got an apartment. We were still living in the house with Gretna and Don. And Nancy was there, and she came into the kitchen and I said, good morning, Grandma. And she said, what's your name? And I said, Andrew. And she said, I have a grandson named Andrew. And I said, yes, I know.
Mm-hmm.
By 1972, she didn't know who we were, which is unfortunate for all of us because she was really a sharp and entertaining person.
Well, Richard said, she was a brilliant woman. She could have done anything. And she was completely self-educated.
And we really were lucky to have her as a grandma growing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was very adoring and supportive.
Although she got mad when I argued with her about the rice that went with the tuna goo. I remember that.
Well, she had
Well,
opinions.
Yeah. Oh, Connor has opinions. I never heard of that before.
No, shocking. That
Here's
was when our parents were in Argentina for 6 months.
Oh, right, because your dad was
6 weeks, Pete.
6
6
weeks.
weeks.
6 weeks, right.
By the way, I have quite a few photographs from that.
Yeah, 6 weeks. Yeah, he was teaching physics or something.
Yeah, at a facility that's still operating in
Bariloche.
Argentina. Bariloche, right.
Which is a resort town.
Well, it's close to a big resort named Yao Yao.
Yeah.
I have some pictures of that as well.
Dumb question. I was going to ask.
Yeah.
The earliest records list Nancy's name with an S, and then the more Americanized ones listed as a C. Do you have a feeling on how Nancy should be spelled?
C.
Okay.
See,
I never saw it spelled with an S.
Yeah.
No, I've never even heard of it.
And she wrote me a few checks in her
on her
day.
birth certificate, it's with an S.
Ah,
Well,
Really?
that's weird.
Yeah.
well, I
That's
learned
weird.
something new. Well, guys, I'm starving,
Okay.
so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
this was
Okay, I didn't have a chance to do it before this, but partly I was mentioning earlier, we had some really awful weather. But I will pull out what I can in the way of photographs and scan them. And to the extent that, Chris, you're taking charge here, I will ship you the originals to
Yeah.
have loaded into whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And I have a few other things and I'll let you know what they are and we can decide if you want to add them to the collection.
I do. And you
Okay.
can put the photographs, and I'll put all the photographs and stuff directly onto this site, which is, it's familysearch.org. It's basically the Mormons. The Mormons have turned their database into a very user-friendly, format that anyone can use. And I like using them partly because I have faith that they will keep their records forever. I believe there's hidden vaults full of servers that are just gonna keep spinning even if the world ends.
It's
So
kind
if
of
you want
like
to keep
that.
it safe, I'd
Yeah.
say put them here. I can send out how to get to this. It's easy to log in and stuff,
Great. I would like to have that.
Yeah,
Well,
please do.
This is wonderful, Chris. I mean,
Yeah, this is cool.
really,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been fun hearing you all talk about all this too. This is quite amazing.
Yeah, it's
And,
really gives you a sort of a feeling of history.
yep. And as we will get more information, we can go do a second round in a bit, talk more about the Chenoweths and the Mayflower and what we find with that stuff.
Whatnot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, I will enjoy that.
Okay, sounds
We
good.
all will.
I'll send out the recording.
Okay,
Beautiful.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye bye.
Good night.
Night.